This is why, well, I'm going to tell you why the American legal system and American lawyers are much better for poor people than anywhere else in the world, unless they have the same system, which I don't know about. In the comments, if you can tell me what other countries have, and here are the magic words: contingent fee. Contingent fee. Let me explain what that is. Uh, you're a relatively poor person, and a relatively rich person punches you in the face and breaks your nose and says, I did that. He may say nothing, but in his head, he thinks, I don't like your color, your religion, the way you part your hair, some reason that certainly doesn't give him any justification for punching you in the face. Now, you want to get compensation for your injury, and a court can't allow you the right to punch him in the face for revenge, but it can give you money. But the only problem is, if you have to go to a lawyer in, say, Europe, you may have to plunk down 5 or 10,000 euros or dollars that you don't have. And the defendant, who is rich, he can plunk down that amount of money easily for defense and more. And if he can have a dream team of lawyers, he wins. He'll have some excuse. Well, what happened to a friend of mine only recently, and I'll make this story short, was he was on a trip and in a foreign country needed an emergency operation. So fortunately, or as it turned out, not so fortunately, he got a very costly medical insurance policy only for the duration of his trip, which was, let's say, 2 weeks. So during those 2 weeks, he had an unexpected medical emergency and needed an expensive operation. He got the operation, and in the recovery room, told his kid to make the proper claim and fill out the forms for this insurance, which he had no doubt he'd be fully covered for because it was an all-risk medical insurance, just for the type of situation that occurred. Guess what? The insurance company had all kinds of reasons why they shouldn't pay. You didn't fill out the form right. Um, well, in this case, part of the bill was due after the insurance expired. Well, anyway, they made all kinds of excuses, none of which were really any good or legally sufficient defenses. So my friend went to a lawyer, said, get me my proper recompense, or get me my money back that I had to pay for this operation. And the lawyer said, oh, that'll be $10,000 up front for my retainer fee, plus the equivalent of $300 an hour, 300 euros, for any time I spend on this, including phone calls with you. Well, the guy didn't have this amount of money to spare, especially after he'd spent a similar amount on the medical bill. So he was, well, to use a crude expression, screwed. He was screwed. He could never get any money. And in contrast, in the United States, there are a number of attorneys who are called kind of a bad name, ambulance chasers. But whether you're an ambulance chaser or not, in America, the contingent fee is a very common thing. And what that is the lawyer doesn't get paid unless he wins the case. And so, of course, lawyers generally are only going to take cases they're pretty sure they're going to win. And especially a big case. I just saw a movie last night. It was called Rainmaker. It was with Matt Damon, and it was a 1997 movie. And in it, there was a poor kid who had medical insurance who needed a transplant, bone marrow transplant. And the insurance company refused to pay for it, and he died a painful death. Matt Damon, who was his lawyer, ambulance chaser or not makes no difference to me, took on the case. And after a lot of interviews with the insurance company, which is obliged to provide uh, internal correspondence and so forth, it turned out that the insurance company wouldn't pay and said they wouldn't pay because bone marrow transplants were an experimental, unproven technique that a lot of doctors didn't like, while their internal correspondence showed that uh, bone transplants, marrow transplants worked usually and would have saved the life of this particular guy, but the insurance company was just too cheap. And this is true of almost every medical insurance company in the business. They will wiggle out of the claim no matter what it takes. But in America, in the USA, contingent fee lawyers will go after the insurance company. And guess what? The insurance companies will usually pay because because they can lose not only big and have punitive damages, but also treble damages, which if the insurance company refuses to pay an obviously good claim, uh, they automatically, the plaintiff collects treble damages. That means 3 times the medical bills and so forth. Okay, I got off the track there. Well, not really. Yeah, I was still on the track. But in the United States, if it's a polluter who poisons your local river, a contingent fee lawyer, there was another movie about that. Well, a contingent fee lawyer can go after the big company that has unlimited resources and very often win. In the Matt Damon case I just told you about, the plaintiff, died, but for the parents, he got punitive damages of, would you believe, $50 million. Well, whether you believe it or not doesn't matter because this was fiction. But the point is, in this movie, the company, of course, goes bankrupt intentionally to avoid paying the 50 million. And of course, the people behind the company just start another company. And poor Matt Damon doesn't get his contingent 50%, which would have been 25 million bucks. But anyway, the point is that in Europe, at least, that's where I'm living now, there is no such thing as a contingent fee. If somebody wealthy or an insurance company or a big company does you wrong, forget about it, die. And in America, if the cigarette company makes you a tobacco addict, there's probably some contingent fee lawyer that will go after the company, and even though they have lots of money, somebody will eventually win a very big recovery. So the bottom line here is that if somebody does you wrong or injures you in Europe, you're probably never going to see a penny. But if it happens in America, a contingency fee lawyer will take the case, and since his fee depends on winning, he'll really put a lot of time and energy. As opposed to in Europe, they get paid by the hour and big money, whether they win or lose. And does this have any drawback? Yeah, there's a drawback because if you have a small business, you're probably going to be besieged by uh, cases that have no merit at all, and you're better off settling quickly and paying off the contingency lawyer than fighting because you lose the case. And another client I had, unbelievable, he had a brick factory, okay? And uh, sometime 20 years after the brick factory was founded, somebody threw a brick at somebody else. And it was one of his bricks they proved in court. And it hit the guy in the head. Now, to me, it's kind of a stretch that if you own a brick factory in New York and somebody throws your brick in California and hits somebody in the head, that you should have any liability. But in this case, the judge, who follows the deep pocket theory in America, that means whoever has the money pays the damages, they found against my friend the brickmaker, and he had to pay a lot of money uh, in restitution for this poor injured guy who had a brick in the head. And the judge rationalized by saying, well, you should have put a warning on the brick saying this brick, if thrown at anybody, could cause property damage or physical injury. Ha, ha, ha. He should label every brick that way. Well, so that's the negative side of contingent fee lawyers. They're not good for business, but they're very good for poor plaintiffs who couldn't afford a lawyer. And that's the end of today's brilliant exposition of the legal system in America. So long. See you tomorrow.